The long-awaited update for Killing Floor 3 is finally here. The Rearmament update brings new weapons to the table and Perk Decoupling. After the 3 months wait for it to be released with only sprinkled information about the update, we finally have it in our hands, being released a week early. The original release date was October 31st, but was released on October 23rd. What came with this update was the long-awaited Perk Decoupling, 3 new weapons, weapon balancing, and Zed adjustments, with the addition of quality of life changes, performances, and stability improvements. Tripwire has mentioned over 700 individual bug fixes in this update as well. After having played update day of and on the weekend, I'll be sharing my thoughts on the update. But my main question was, will this update be the saving grace or a stepping stone that Killing Floor 3 needs to bring players back, or will this become another Payday 3 Operation Medic bag? Starting off with my thoughts on the Rearmament update prior to release. This segment is to help set a general idea of how I felt about the update. In my video sharing my first thoughts on the trailer, I honestly believe that the update itself brings little content to the game. Only 3 guns, 9 new weapon mods for the new weapons, and the perk decoupling. With these 2 being the main focus of the update at the time, my assumption is that players would come back for only a few days or even a few hours depending on how far they are in terms of perk levels and hours invested into the game. In my opinion, the main issue is that the new weapons can only carry the update for a short time, and the perk decoupling, being the other half of the update, means not that many people would stay and play the game since there are no new maps or modes to keep them playing longer. My prediction at the time is that there will be a high influx of players playing the new update for a couple of days, but will drop the game once they realize that the update itself didn't bring much to the table to keep players more engaged. Meaning, the same mechanics, same maps, weekly mutations, and daily assignments. My hope was that they added more content besides the main 2 focus. For example, they made a community poll for wavelengths, which thinking out loud would be a good idea to implement and utilize it in a certain way. Longer waves or even creating different daily mutations. If they were to add longer waves, this could be considered the new standard weekly mutations, while the daily mutations could use the standard 6 waves that we have currently. Allowing a more casual daily for players to still have something new to come back to, gain XP, and fulfill daily assignments. Another potential idea could have been to add back endless mode as an alternative. In general, my thoughts were mostly negative in terms of the game reviving itself, comparing it to Payday 3's Operation Medic bag, where they promise updates and additions to the game like offline mode, performance improvements, etc. For almost a whole year. Even then, updates for that were lackluster, took longer, and even then, post Operation Medic bag, there are still some things they promised that never came to the game. You must be wondering why I'm comparing this update to Payday 3, as they both started in a similar state, but in my honest opinion, Payday 3 was far worse. Similarly, when Payday 3 came out, I had hopes for it, but was disappointed due to the lack of content being added after year 1, and Operation Medic bag not doing much for the game itself either. Looking at the Rearmament update's underbelly that's supposed to improve stability and performance sounded familiar to Operation Medic bag. Rather than taking the first whole year and the studio releasing the updates periodically during its first year, Tripwire is attempting to do majority of it in one update, while still working on more fixes, performance stability, and quality of life changes. In the forum post on October 16th, they mentioned that there will be more updates to the performance coming with the winter update, hopefully with Season 2 of Year 1. Moving on to the main focus of the update, which is the weapons and the perk decoupling. I'll share my thoughts after we cover everything that came with this update. Starting with the perk decoupling, it's cool that we get to choose any character with any perks, but what else is there to it? There was lacking information about the perk decoupling besides what is shown on the surface. I hope that with the decoupling it would encourage players to use perk weapons more by giving more proficiency bonuses as an example. Since most perk skills only specified weapons and not the normal perk weapons, I have seen some people suggest that using the right perk with the right specialist should give a bonus, which is a nice thought, but it would make the perk decoupling a bit useless. This alternative would feel more natural as it is optional to go off perk or stay on perk in terms of weapons. These were my primary thoughts and ideas in terms of pre-rearmament update. I didn't go into full detail in the Rearmament update trailer because it was my initial thoughts, and after a month of thinking, these were some features I wanted to see come with the Rearmament update. While playing, I noticed that there is no option to change perk mid-match, which is a feature that is missing that was the norm in KF1 and 2. Being allowed to change perks mid-wave allowed more versatility and gives players a chance to accommodate what is missing in their team. I'm not going to go into full details of everything in terms of weapon balance, as I have a video that solely focuses on the weapon balancing that was mentioned for the Rearmament update. To also note, the majority of the changes did not change, but I will mention some that caught my attention. Some additional changes to some weapons, like the 3-round cylinder for the G33 does not have the 71% damage boost as they mentioned prior. The Bone Breaker actually got its cost increased slightly, now sitting at 3,800 Dodge, and the Vulcan and the G33 cannot do crit damage anymore, as a few things that were noticeably added when the update launched. To sum up the forum post on October 16th, that focuses on Zed balances, which were just adjustments to make dodging a bit easier for the players. Streiks and Flesh Pounds take longer to block incoming damage, while bosses got their damage adjusted. Husk's Fireball and Homing Attack has been reduced by 30% and 40% respectively, while Sirens also got the range attack speed reduced and the homing removed. There was also a buff to Affliction on bigger Zeds, excluding bosses, which allows execution against players to be cancelled out. A new mechanic was added that allows Zeds to be stumbled if they were slid into or jumped on. Another thing that was added was that the audio for the Streiks and Flesh Pounds have been tuned up to be similar to how it was in KF2, where the music would lower so that you can hear them spawn. To add to that, they now have louder footsteps, which is a nice touch. On to the second half of the update, the guns. We have the MKR 350, the M14 EBR Mod 0, and the Streik Dual Defender Shotgun. Each gun comes with 3 unique mods for the respective guns. I'll be breaking this up into sections, making it easier on sharing my thoughts on each gun. I plan on making individual videos on these guns, but here's a short version for each one. Starting off with the AK, or the MKR 350 Assault Rifle. I've been looking forward to this gun for the longest time. It costs 2,900 Dodge with a base damage of 90, and is a tier 2 weapon. The game felt a bit odd not having an AK style weapon, and I'm happy it's here. Animations looked nice, but felt that the AK got a bit robbed in terms of mods, as it only received polymer tip ammo, a green dot sight, and dual mags. To mention, in the Rearmament trailer, the green dot isn't mentioned as a unique mod for the MKR. Dual mags is probably the most unique mod, but the other two are just alright in my opinion. After playing around with the MKR, I have discovered a few things. First off, the green dot is partially a universal mod for most weapons, which is a nice touch as it gives a 20% increase in accuracy right off the bat. The second thing I discovered is that the polymer tip is also partially a universal attachment for other guns as well. The last thing that I noticed is that the MKR has a third receiver mod, which allows it to be in burst fire, with the base mode being a 2-round burst going to 3 rounds when maxed. This caught my attention since this was not mentioned as a unique mod for the MKR, as the other commando weapons do not have this receiver. Using the gun for a bit, I honestly had more fun using it than the guns added to the update. It's simple but is surprising. In comparison, the MKR is a slightly better Wraith, with its base damage being increased to 88. The MKR holds more ammo while holding the highest damage between the Wraith and the Stormguard. In comparison with its tier 2 partner, the Stormguard, the MKR isn't a carbon copy and feels like its own weapon in terms of bridging tier 2 and tier 3 weapons. Overall, the AK surpassed my expectations due to the lack of information given about it, and how some things weren't even mentioned as a mod like the burst receiver, or that the ammo types and sights would be universal to an extent. The gun itself is fairly accurate and DPS is decent, but overall it's a standard commando weapon. I tend to pair this weapon up with the Ninja as well due to its access to polymer tip ammo, with cut being the primary damage, allowing it to benefit off of Ninja skills for cut based damage weapons and range weapons with cut damage. Next is the M14 EBR Mod 0, a classic to the Killing Floor franchise. It costs 3,000 Dosh, base damage of 230, and is a tier 2 weapon. The M14 was another gun I was excited to see, as it was always part of my loadout in Killing Floor 1 and 2 whenever I played Sharpshooter. The M14 unique mods are a fast attach suppressor barrel, full auto receiver, and match grade ammo. The match grade ammo is the actual new ammo type to the game, prioritizing ballistic damage first, then sound wave. Like the polymer ammo type, it can be used on some weapons. The M14 certainly feels a bit slower in terms of fire rate, but it also does not feel like another Artemis, which made me a bit worried at first, since Tripwire's track record would have something similar to a base gun, but ever so slightly different, or even a reskin. The M14 doesn't feel that way. The trade for more power than fire rate helps keep its uniqueness in Tier 2. Similar to the MKR, it is a good in-between of the Artemis and the ESR. Even with the full auto receiver, the fire rate isn't as good as the Artemis, even when firing a single shot. The Artemis has better accuracy and fire rate, but on the other hand, the M14 has the damage and potential to surpass the Artemis. Overall, from my experience, the M14 is pretty fun, but the iron sights are kind of terrible, and I highly recommend using a sight. The full auto receiver brings something different to the sharpshooter weapons, as it seems like it doesn't increase single shot fire rate, but it's still fun to use. The last weapon of this update is the Streik Dual Defender Shotgun, or the Double Barrel. Another classic weapon to the franchise, bringing the firepower with both barrels. It costs $1,800 with a base damage of 700 and it's a tier 1 weapon. Yeah, the double barrel is a tier 1 weapon. The unique mods that come with it are the extended barrel, quad barrel, and the break action shell ejector receiver. To note, the break action shell ejector receiver mentioned prior seems to have been replaced with the high velocity receiver. The quad barrel makes a return so you can recreate the Doomstick, but one noticeable mechanic I noticed that seems to be gone is the fact that the double barrel does not push you back when shooting both barrels. Even with the quad barrel, there is no pushback sadly. The Streik is a good gun, but is probably my least favorite out of the three. The fire rate seems a bit too sluggish and I ran into some kind of weird audio issue when shooting all 4 barrels at once. It was also odd since the hit detection was off by a second. The Streik has the least amount of mod slots, being ammo type, sight, receiver, and barrel. To exchange the high damage being in tier 1 and less mod slots, the exchange was that the mods specifically for the Streik are expensive, with just 2 mods, the quad barrel and the high velocity receiver costing up to $4,000. I find myself using the shotgun as a replacement for the Bone Breaker loadout for the Ninja. Since the Bone Breaker did get an increased price, the Streik seems to be a better option when running Flechette ammo type while still taking advantage of the Ninja's passive skills. The update also brings along new cosmetic items. And that's it. That's the segment. In all seriousness, the update gives players a new player card that's themed around the Flesh Pound's evolution through the years, and a new headgear for Foster and Obi. They also added new cosmetics to the rotation for Obi, Foster, and Akata. While there are 3 to 4 new weapon skins and a few new trinkets, one trinket being a reference to the Dollhouse mod or the Halloween event from Killing Floor 1, also known as the Toymaster mod, which is nice. Another thing is, like I said before, the new weapons can only carry the update for so long, in which once the community covers the weapon's strengths or builds, it is pretty much done. The weapon balancing was more of a disappointment. The only noticeable adjustments were the Wraith, Scar, Knightsbridge, G33, Vulcan, Yumi, Bonebreaker, and Kunais, to each either receiving a buff or a nerf. The rest of the weapon balancing were more or less just adjustments to accuracy, stability, and recoil, which are nice, but with the majority of the weapons having that as their balance, they weren't really game changers in my opinion. They are good, but not great to sum it up. In terms of weapon balancing, it's okay. There were some weapons I hoped to have gotten a decent buff to make them feel usable, like the M7 for the fire bug, but that never came through. In terms of the new weapons, I personally like them. They probably end up overshadowing the older weapons currently, but with them being in such low tiers, the MKR and the M14 being tier 2, and the Streik being a tier 1, there's variety, but not that much variety. Since we have 2 tier 2 weapons that feel more like a 2.5 tier, 2 weapons in comparison to the base game ones. It's interesting, but so much of a game changer as some people might have hoped for. They are good, but that's about it. Good mix up in terms of weapons, but that's fine. At the time of this video, my CPU is an AMD FX TM8350 8-core processor, and GPU is a GeForce RTX 3050. Performance-wise, I think was the highlight for me, as the performance wasn't as bad as it was before. I certainly saw the difference while playing the update, as well as comparing it to previous recordings as well. The quality of life, performance, and stability fixes some issues. Personally, the game runs much smoother for me and feels slightly more responsive. The optimization for levels could be slightly better, as the first time loading from the VTOL, it can be slightly sluggish on initial loading in. Afterwards, during map loading and load time, it's much better. There are still some hiccups here and there that do happen sometimes. I ran into an issue where I jumped on a crawler and the game froze for a few seconds, but it was pretty decent in terms of running. The CPU used to run at around 90%, but now sits around 70%, while my GPU runs around less than 20% at 40 to 50 degrees. In general, the performance portion of the Rearmament update certainly did make improvements. To summarize the Rearmament update, it was decent. It is certainly a step in the right direction. The perk decoupling was something that the community wanted and needed, and showed that Tripwire is willing to listen to the community and hear their opinions. The fact that they added the perk decoupling so soon after launch was a surprise, as some developers would end up delaying it for later on or be lazy with it, which is quite something. Even though it's not the perfect perk decoupling, it's still something that was needed, and they could still upgrade that system. The new weapons are decent as they are, all three being unique and not copies of other weapons, making it worth trying out even though they can only carry the update for only a short amount of time. It was the main thing I was excited for this update. The weapon balancing could have been better, it's just okay. There's not much to really talk about since the majority of the balancing was just the same thing across the board. Some of the Zed Balancing did not seem that necessary in my opinion, especially making attacks easier to dodge was something I didn't have any real issues with. Lastly, the performance, quality of life, optimization, and stability certainly had the most improvements in my opinion. Overall, the update is just okay. Not great and not bad. The Rearmament update still brought something for players to look forward to, which is the new weapons and the perk decoupling. Especially the Vulcan nerf, but there has been some discussions about another weapon taking the Vulcan's place. The new weapons are good to mess around with, while the perk decoupling is just for aesthetics. It's still something for players that have been asking for it since the beginning. If every update comes with 3 new weapons from here on out, that also allows every perk to get a new weapon. I think the worry of barely any weapons will be solved soon. It's certainly a step in the right direction for the game itself, but the consistency of updates from here on out will be the real test for Tripwire, to really gain the community and the player base back to Killing Floor 3 in my opinion. With the next big update being Season 2 of the Supply Pass, also considered the Winter update, bringing back Scully, the Stalker, new weapons and mods, as well as the prison map, my prediction would be that it releases around the time for Steam's Winter Sale. I believe the Winter update will either make or break the game. I'm not downplaying the Rearmament update for what it did for the game currently, but I believe that the Winter update will be the standard of how Killing Floor 3 will be updated based on the Supply Pass or seasons, and what each season brings to the table, which should be maps, weapon mods, something new like new Zeds, enemies, and new perks like Gunslinger, but that's for another video.